The server told me I couldn't eat because I was pregnant. Then she insulted my husband. She didn't expect me to fight back. I see you waddling up, you can't eat here. The server's voice, artificially bright and sharp as oyster-shucking steel, cut through the humid, salty air of the raw bar. I stopped, my hand instinctively going to the tight, round drum of my belly. 34 weeks. Every movement was a negotiation, a slow, rolling waddle that had become my new normal. I'd been prepared for the fatigue, the swollen ankles, the inability to see my own feet. I had not been prepared for the casual cruelty of strangers. I forced a laugh, a tight, thin sound that felt foreign in my own throat. Just here to hang out, I managed, trying to project an air of good sport that I did not feel. I was just happy to be out. That's what I'd told myself in the car anyway. Happy to feel like a person, not just a vessel, even for an hour. I'd been running late. A meeting had bled into overtime, and by the time I'd heaved myself out of my office chair, my back was a column of fire. But the thought of the gilded clam had pulled me through the day. It was our place. Mine and my husband's. The thought of him and our best friend, waiting for me with the promise of laughter and second-hand seafood smell, was the only thing that got me through the gridlock traffic. I saw them tucked into our usual high-top booth by the window. My husband, all easy smiles and broad shoulders, was already deep in conversation with our friend. They'd been friends since college, and their presence together was a comfort, a solid, familiar landmark. I slid into the booth, the vinyl groaning in protest. "There she is," my husband said, his eyes lighting up. He leaned over to kiss me, his lips tasting faintly of the IPA he'd already started. "Sorry I'm late," I murmured, breathing him in. "You're not late, you're perfectly timed," our friend said, raising her glass of wine. "We just ordered drinks." The server, the same one from the door, loomed over the table. She was all sharp angles, with a notepad held like a weapon. "And for you?" she asked, her eyes flicking pointedly between my face and my stomach. "Just a club soda with lime, please," I said. She scribbled it down. "Good choice, wouldn't want to hurt the baby." My husband and friend, busy discussing something about their workday, missed it entirely. But I didn't. It was the second jab, a paper cut of judgment. I felt a low, familiar hum of irritation begin deep in my chest. This wasn't going to be the relaxing night I'd pictured. This was going to be a performance. I was going to have to perform the role of the happy, gracious pregnant lady for a server who had apparently decided I was a public nuisance. She walked away, and I tried to shake it off. I was here. I was with my two favorite people. The ambience of the clam was doing its best to soothe me. The low roar of conversation, the clatter of shells on ice, the briny scent that always reminded me of our first vacation together. I watched my husband scan the chalkboard menu on the wall, and I felt a pang of longing so sharp it almost stole my breath. Oysters and beer. It wasn't just food. It was a ritual, it was us. Our love story could be told in oyster shells. I'd introduced my husband to them on our third date. He'd been skeptical, eyeing the glistening, grayish-pink morsels like they were alien pods. "You want me to eat that?" he'd asked, his nose wrinkled. "Trust me," I'd said, demonstrating the technique. "A little squeeze of lemon, a tiny dab of mignonette. Tip it back, don't chew, just experience it." He did. His eyes went wide. He tasted the salt, the sea, the subtle cucumber finish of the Kumamoto I'd chosen for his gateway oyster. And in that moment, a tradition was born. I grew up on the coast, I knew the pull of the tides. I knew the mineral-sharp kiss of a wellfleet and the buttery, sweet finish of a malpec. It was a part of my heritage, a language I'd learned from my father. My husband, a man from the landlocked Midwest, knew beer. He knew hops and barley, the complex notes of a sour versus a stout. So we made a deal. I picked the oysters, he picked the beer. It was our balance. A perfect, symbiotic partnership played out on restaurant tables across the city. It wasn't about control. It was about trust. He trusted my palate to find him the perfect dozen, and I trusted his to pair it with a drink that would make the flavors sing. Sitting there, 34 weeks pregnant, that partnership felt like a lifetime ago. For the last 8 months, our thing had been put on ice. My diet was a minefield of restrictions. No raw fish, no deli meat, no soft cheese. And absolutely, positively, no oysters and beer. I missed it. I missed the spontaneity, the flavor, but most of all, I missed that easy, shared language with my husband. "Okay," the server said, returning to the table with my sad little club soda. "Are we ready to order food or—" My husband, bless his heart, turned to the server, full of enthusiasm. We definitely want oysters, he said. But I'm going to need some help, my wife's the expert. He beamed at me, a proud, beautiful, and utterly oblivious smile. I felt a genuine smile, my first of the night, touch my lips. What do you have on the board today? I asked the server, leaning forward as much as my belly would allow. This was my turf. Even if I couldn't eat, I could still participate. I could still share my knowledge. I could still be the me I was before this baby took over my entire body. I could, for a moment, be the woman who knew her way around a raw bar. The server rattled off the list. We've got blue points, wellfleets, pemmiquids, and some cushy. My husband looked at me, his eyes glazed over. Babe. Okay, I said, feeling the familiar rhythm settle over me. The blue points are going to be super salty, which you don't love. The pemmiquids are good, really mineral heavy. But, I tapped the menu. I think you'll like the wellfleets, they're balanced. And the cushy are small and sweet, almost like melon. Remember those ones we had in Seattle, like that? My friend who had opted for shrimp cocktail watched us with a small smile. She knew this dance. She'd seen it many times. Okay, perfect, my husband said to the server. We'll do a half dozen of the wellfleets and a half dozen of the cushy. He was happy. I was happy, my little craving for normalcy satisfied. The only person in a 10-foot radius who didn't seem happy was the server. Her pen was hovering, her jaw tight. She looked directly at me, her gaze flat and cold. And then she said it. Wow, the server said, her voice dripping with a kind of saccharine disdain. You're pretty bossy, aren't you? The words landed on the table with a wet thud. The cheerful din of the restaurant seemed to warp, the sound sucking into a vacuum around our booth. My husband blinked, confused. What? Our friend froze, her wine glass halfway to her lips. I stared at the server. My mind was a sudden blank static. Bossy, the word echoed. Bossy, not knowledgeable, not helpful. Bossy, because I was a woman. Because I was a pregnant woman. Because I had dared to have an opinion about something my husband had explicitly asked for my opinion on. I was just telling him which ones he'd like. I stammered, the confidence I'd felt just a second before evaporating. I felt my cheeks burn, a hot, shameful tide rising up my neck. Right, the server said, with a smirk that didn't touch her eyes. She scribbled on her pad. 1 dozen, mixed, anything else. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to slide under the table and vanish. I wanted to stand up and scream. He asked me, that's our thing. Instead, I shrank. I physically pulled back, my shoulders hunching. No, I whispered, that's all. I ignored her. That was the only defense I had. I put up a wall, brick by quick, silent brick. I wouldn't make eye contact. I wouldn't speak to her. I would order for my husband as he'd asked, but I made no other comments. I didn't offer an opinion on the shrimp cocktail or the fries our friend ordered for the table. I just stopped. My husband, bless his sweet, non-confrontational heart, was already moving on. He didn't see the venom in the exchange. He just saw an awkward moment. He squeezed my knee under the table. Can't wait, he said, trying to bring the mood back, but the joy was gone. The gilded clam, our place, suddenly felt hostile. The lights felt too bright, the laughter from other tables too loud. When the oysters arrived, they looked beautiful. They were glistening, perfectly shucked, nestled on a bed of crushed ice with lemon wedges and a small ramekin of red wine mignonette. My husband moaned in appreciation as he slurped the first wellfleet. Oh man, honey, he said, his eyes closed. You were so right, these are incredible. He held one out to me, a reflexive, loving gesture. Want a sniff? I shook my head, my throat too tight to speak. I'm good, I managed to say. I watched him eat. I watched him enjoy the very thing that bound us, and I felt a profound, aching sense of loneliness. I wasn't his partner tonight. I was a bossy waddler who, according to the server, wasn't allowed to eat here. I was on the outside, looking in at my own life. Our friend tried to bridge the gap. She asked about the nursery, about my upcoming baby shower, about what color we were finally going to paint the feature wall. I answered in monosyllables. The conversation was stilted, artificial. The tension was a fourth, unwanted guest at our table. I nursed my club soda, the ice melting, the bubbles long dead. I just wanted to go home. My husband, fueled by the joy of his first dozen oysters and blissfully unaware of the emotional storm brewing inside me, was not ready to go home. He was in his element. He was with his wife and his best friend at his favorite bar, eating his favorite food. That was amazing, he announced, placing the last, pearlescent shell back on the platter. I think I need another round. My heart sank. More time in this booth, more time under the watchful, judgmental gaze of our server. Are you sure? I asked, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. It's getting kind of late. Oh, come on, he said, playful. Live a little, it's Friday. He flagged the server down. She approached the table with all the enthusiasm of a tax auditor. Yes. I need more, my husband said, grinning. But I need her help again. He gestured to me. Honey, what were those other ones, the sweet ones? Tell her I want a full dozen of those. He was trying to include me. He was trying to re-establish our ritual. He was, in his own way, telling me, you're still the expert, you're still my partner. He had no idea he was handing the server a loaded gun. I took a deep breath. I could feel her eyes on me. I refused to look at her. I stared at the wood grain of the table. He would like 1 dozen of the cushy oysters, please, I said, my voice quiet, polite, and completely devoid of emotion. There was a long, heavy pause. I could feel my friend tense up beside me. I could feel my husband's breezy, expectant smile. The server let out a long, put-upon sigh. It was a sound of pure exasperation, loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. You know, she said, and her voice was no longer artificially bright. It was flat and sharp. You really are just pushing him around, aren't you? My head snapped up. It was so shocking, so brazenly unprofessional that I almost laughed again. But this time there was no humor, not even the manufactured kind. My husband's smile vanished. Excuse me, he said, his voice dropping an octave. But the server wasn't looking at him. She was looking at me. And in her eyes I saw an ocean of resentment. Maybe she'd had a bad day. Maybe she hated her job. Maybe she hated pregnant women. It didn't matter. She leaned in, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial, venomous hiss. I just hope you come back when you're not pregnant, she said, a sickly sweet smile plastered on her face. So I can get to know the real you. And that was it. The dam didn't just break. It exploded. It wasn't pregnancy hormones. It wasn't a snap. It was the culmination of 34 weeks of being treated like public property, of having strangers touch my belly in the grocery store, of being told what I could and couldn't eat, of being reduced from a person to a condition. The real me. The implication was that this person sitting here, this tired, swollen, protective, and deeply knowledgeable woman, was an imposter, a hormonal, bossy changeling, and that the real me was what? A quiet, docile, accommodating girl who would let her husband order the wrong oysters and smile blankly. The rage was a physical thing. It was a white-hot light behind my eyes. It was a clarity so profound it was almost peaceful. I saw her. I saw her judgment, her petty power trip, her deep-seated misogyny. My friend gasped, "You can't be serious." My husband was already saying, "Ma'am, that's completely out of line." But I held up a hand. I didn't need them to fight this. I needed to fight this. I looked the server dead in the eye. My voice was low, and it did not shake. It was the coldest, clearest sound in the entire raucous restaurant. Would you like us to order less? It wasn't a question. It was a statement. It was a threat. It meant, you are a server. We are the customers. Your job is to take our order. Ours is to pay. You have just jeopardized that entire, simple transaction with your personal, hateful garbage. The server's face, which had been contorted in a mask of smug disdain, crumpled. The color drained from her cheeks. She suddenly looked small. She had bullied a pregnant woman, and the pregnant woman had, quietly and lethally, bullied her right back. She didn't speak. She just got quiet. Her mouth opened and closed once, a fish on a hook. Then she turned wordlessly and walked away. Silence descended on our table. My husband was staring at me, his mouth agape. My friend looked like she was about to burst into applause. I just sat there, my heart hammering against my ribs, my hand still resting on the high, hard curve of my belly. A minute later, a new server appeared. A young man with kind eyes and a professional, reserved demeanor. "Good evening," he said, pulling a fresh notepad from his apron. "My name is Carlos. Can I get you anything?" My husband, finally finding his voice, cleared his throat. "Yes," he said, giving me a look I couldn't quite decipher. "Yes, we would like 1 dozen of the cushy oysters." The rest of the meal was a blur. Carlos was a ghost, a perfect, efficient, and blessedly invisible server. The oysters came, my husband ate them, and our friend steered the conversation into the safest of waters. The weather, a new movie she'd seen, the ridiculous price of baby strollers. But I was elsewhere. I was replaying the scene, over and over. I was dissecting the server's words, turning them over like the sharp, jagged edges of a broken shell. I hope you come back when you're not pregnant, so I can get to know the real you. The twist, the secret, The thing that settled in my bones and chilled me far more than the ice in my club soda was this: she wasn't entirely wrong. A part of me was gone. The real me, the easygoing, laugh-it-off girl I used to be, had been replaced. She'd been replaced by this new, raw-nerved creature who was tired and sore and ferociously protective. This 34-week pregnant woman wasn't the real me. Not the whole story anyway, but the server had it all backward. She thought my pregnancy was a mask. She thought it was a temporary hormonal fog that was making me bossy and difficult. She was waiting for this phase to pass, for me to get back to normal, and revert to the pleasant, agreeable woman she thought I should be. The secret was, this wasn't a mask. It was a chrysalis, and the person emerging was someone new. The real me she was waiting for. That girl wouldn't have known how to handle her. That girl would have laughed it off, just like I did at the door. She would have internalized the bossy comment, felt ashamed, and spent the rest of the night apologizing to my husband for having an opinion. She would have let the real me comment slide, because it was easier than making a scene. The woman I was now, the unreal me, was the one who had finally found her voice. The one who had drawn a line in the sand. The twist wasn't that I was hormonal. The twist was that, for the first time, I was truly, fully myself. The pregnancy hadn't made me bossy. It had made me incapable of tolerating disrespect. It had stripped away my patience for casual misogyny. It had given me a new, powerful, primal reason to demand to be seen. The server hadn't met the real me until the very last second. The real me wasn't the woman who knew oysters. The real me was the woman who, when her partnership was insulted and her identity was dismissed, calmly and precisely cut the offender off at the knees. I looked at my husband, who was watching me with a worried expression. I looked at my friend, who was trying so hard to pretend everything was normal, and I realized the server wasn't just mad about the oysters. She was mad that I had refused to be small. She tried to put me in a box, the waddling incubator, the bossy wife, and I had refused to fit. My very presence, my knowledge, my partnership with my husband was a threat to her. "You okay?" my husband murmured, reaching for my hand across the table. His palm was warm and solid. I entwined my fingers with his. I gave him a small, real smile. "I am now," I said. The resolution was quiet. It wasn't a fiery confrontation with a manager. There was no public shaming. The best revenge, I decided, was to simply enjoy the rest of our night, to reclaim our space, and to erase her from our evening. Carlos, our new server, was the agent of that revenge. He was everything she was not: attentive without being intrusive, polite without being familiar. He refilled my club soda 3 times, each with a fresh lime, without my ever having to ask. He brought my husband a second IPA, commenting on his excellent choice of brew. He treated us like valued guests, not like a problem to be managed. My husband, finally sensing the true depth of the earlier encounter, made a point of engaging with him. He asked Carlos his opinion on the Pemaquids versus the Blue Points. He asked about the restaurant, how long he'd worked there. He was, in his own way, showing me, this is how it should be. This is normal. She was the exception. When the bill came, my husband placed his credit card in the folder without looking at the total. "Wait," I said. I dug in my purse, passed the baby books and the prenatal vitamins, and pulled out a $20 bill. I handed it to my husband. "For Carlos," I said, "make sure he gets it directly." My husband nodded, understanding. He tucked the 20 into the folder on top of the bill. He wrote in the tip line, adding another 25% for the house. It was a quiet, financial thank you to Carlos, and a pointed, silent fuck you to the woman who had tried to ruin our night. As we gathered our things, I felt the familiar ache in my lower back return. I stood up, the waddle in full effect. My friend grabbed my coat, holding it for me like I was fragile, and I waved her off. "I've got it." We walked toward the exit. The original server was by the bar, polishing glasses. Her back was to us, but I could feel her presence, a cold spot in the otherwise warm room. She was studiously ignoring us. She was pretending we didn't exist. I paused, just for a second. My husband, his hand on the small of my back, paused with me. She must have felt my gaze because she turned. Her eyes met mine. There was no apology in them. But there was something else. There was recognition, and perhaps a flicker of fear. She had pushed, and I had pushed back harder. She had tried to make me small, and in doing so had revealed her own smallness. I held her gaze. I didn't smile, I didn't scowl, I just looked. I let her see me. The pregnant woman, the wife, the bossy expert, the customer who had just ensured her coworker got a fantastic tip at her expense. She looked away first. She broke eye contact, turned back to her glasses, and scrubbed at a smudge that wasn't there. She had been dismissed. My husband guided me out the door. The cold, damp November air hit my face, and I inhaled deeply. It tasted like salt and freedom. The car ride home was quiet for the first few blocks. My friend in the back seat finally broke the silence. "For the record," she said, her voice firm, she was 100% out of line. "I am so glad you said something. I was ready to flip the table." I laughed, a real, genuine laugh. I could tell. My husband was gripping the steering wheel, his knuckles white. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice thick. "I didn't really get what was happening until it was over. I should have stepped in, I should have." "What?" I said, touching his arm. "Made a scene. It wasn't worth engaging in, remember?" I said it gently, teasing him with his own words from the Reddit post I would later write. He winced. "I know, but when she said that, about the real you, that was, God, she was awful to you." "It's okay," I said, and I meant it. "I handled it." "You did," my friend said from the back. "You really, really did." When we got home, we said goodnight to our friend and trudged up the stairs to our apartment. I was exhausted, but it was a good kind of tired. A triumphant tired. As I was brushing my teeth, my husband came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my belly. He rested his chin on my shoulder, and we looked at our reflection in the mirror. A team. "You really are the oyster expert," he murmured, kissing my temple. "And you're the beer expert," I replied, leaning back into him. I don't want you to think," he struggled, "that I think you're bossy. I like that you know things. It's one of the reasons I love you." "I know," I said. "And I love that you let me." Later, lying in bed, I felt the baby kick, a strong, insistent jab to my ribs. I lay my hand on the spot, and my husband covered it with his. I'd been worrying for weeks that pregnancy hormones were changing me, making me irrational, making me angry. I was worried I had overreacted, that I'd snapped at her when I should have just seen it as harmless clowning. But as I lay there, feeling the new life moving inside me, I knew the truth. A person's identity isn't erased by their circumstances. A pregnant woman isn't just a waddling belly. She is a person, complete with a history, a wealth of knowledge, a partnership, and a right to be respected. The server didn't see me as a person. She saw me as a symptom. She saw me as a joke. I was worried my pregnancy hormones made me snap. I was wrong. It wasn't my hormones that finally roared. It was my humanity.